Hey guys, it's Steven from the Green Engineers, and I wanted to elaborate on my most recent update video. Today I was going to talk a little bit more about what I meant about the new upcoming service/products coming to my website and other platforms, other standard platforms that you may use. So today we're going to be talking about the filament making and what that is going to entail as a service, and the different products that you can buy from the Green Engineers in that service. Okay, so again, this is part of the three systems that I was talking about in my last update, which are going to quote unquote keep the lights on for the Green Engineers, which means that it'll allow me to stay or more quickly become full-time the Green Engineers, and also make sure that I can stay the Green Engineers full-time instead of having to get some sort of side gig that doesn't benefit the Green Engineers' future. Also, it helps pay for the different R&Ds for the different equipments, right? It basically helps me develop those pieces of equipment. So basically, what we're going to be talking about is those. We're going to be talking specifically about the Filament Maker, but we have three of those that I talked about. We had the commercial 3D printing, which would help me pay for some of the bills as well as develop my 3D printer. And then we had classes, which will help basically pay the bills, pretty much, not really and also R&D for the different pieces of equipment. And the pieces of equipment I'm talking about are those main four: the extruder, the hot end I meant, the shredder, the filament maker, and the 3D printer, right? So those four are what needs to have R&D done for it. So commercial printer is for the 3D printer as well as paying the bills. The classes is for paying the bills as well as helping support those other four projects where they need it. And this one is for the filament maker. So why am I doing this for the filament maker? So again, it's that same kind of trifecta system where it's going to help keep the lights on at the Green Engineers, and this is going to be one of the more profitable of those three. Probably the classes would be the most profitable. The classes, and then this one, and then the commercial 3D printing. So it'll help keep the lights on at the Green Engineers and make sure that I stay full-time, and also decrease the time it takes for me to quit my day job and go full-time. Also, it'll help pay for the R&D to make my second version of the extruder. Well, you're saying, hey Steven, then how did you make these? Because these both are filaments that I made in-house. So we'll talk about that in a second. So it'll help pay for the R&D for my own filament maker. And then the third thing is also it will be available as a sample that you can use to see the quality of filament that the filament maker puts out. So instead of asking for like a small sample, you can just buy some of the filament and you can use it to get a sample of how, if you were to own one of my filament makers, my version 2 of my filament maker, what would the quality be like? So with this, you can just buy a spool and then you could be able to sample it yourself. So those are the main ones. So now let's go ahead and talk about, like, when I say R&D, well, you're like, well, Steven, you have some here, what's up with that? So as I explained in the update video, I am currently using a competitor's filament maker. And because my current one is not done, we have a rough prototype design, but we need to go through the R&D stages. So we need to develop the first prototype and then iterate on it to make it, to perfect it, and then go into either crowdfunding or direct-to-customer sales, right? Or B2B, business-to-business sales. So right now, this is going to help with the competitor's filament maker to start getting a grab on some of the market, and also help learn different things about coloring the filament, and being able to have a list of the different amounts of pigments and what kind of colors you'd get, and then trying to correlate that to Pantone colors or RGB or CMYK colors to be able to release that for my own filament maker. Also, the competitor filament maker actually happens to be probably the filament maker that I'm going to be directly competing with. It's in a very similar price range. And at some point I plan on talking more about which specific one that is, and also what I think about it. That's another thing, is that I'll be able to look at my competition and see what I like and what I don't like, and what can be better implemented in my my own filament maker, which there is a lot with this competitor filament maker. I consider this competitor filament maker kind of the bare minimum needed to create a good quality filament, which is usually good enough for most people, but I want mine to have a better quality and be more reliable. And it has this competitor filament maker has various engineer flaws in a couple places, so make sure that those don't happen in my own system. And I like to do that as far as testing out the other type of equipment. That's why I have like the Stratasys, right? So I could test out the super high-end stuff and machines, as well as I'll probably before I release my own printer, I'll probably try another 2 or 3 high-end printers that would be in my target feel, the feel of my own printer, but yet some things will be cut to bring the price down so that most people could use a printer of that kind of quality, right? And so also it would kind of be the intersection between high-end printers and then regular open source available printers. So it'd be kind of that middle ground. Anyways, so let's go ahead and talk more about what's going to be happening with this filament maker, this filament that's going to be available. So again, you could use it just as your regular filament, or you can use it as a sample for later on when I start developing the filament with my own filament maker, because at some point my filament maker will surpass the quality of the filament outputted by the competitor's filament maker, and then that will be what will be making the filaments for the websites and the samples, right? For the website, the samples, and all of the other platforms I sell it on. And then at that point, I will continue using that and no longer use the competitor's filament maker. So one of the things I forgot to mention on the update video is that I'm probably only going to do 2 different types of materials that go with the Green Engineer's mission. So the Green Engineer's mission is plant-based or recyclable material, reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So either change it to some sort of plant-based material or recycle and reuse that for 3D printing. So I'm not going to be using the standard things that I've been printing. So here is ABS white. It's actually natural. This is the color that it looks like when it comes off. That's the color of the pellets. And then this is these same pellets but colored black. So this is a black spool loaded on the Stratasys spool that loads right into the cartridge, and it's perfect size for the cartridge. So all of my unloaded Stratasys spools I've now reloaded. So I've done ABS, I've done ASA, I've done, I'm about to do hips, and then I'm going to do this next material I'm talking about. So there are PLA. So PLA is another one that would be a standard plant-based material. There's also a couple other materials that are those plant-based. But the issues with those is that right now the market is so saturated with people that are making that material that it would be very difficult for me starting out to stand out. So those might be an order to make type thing, where you order it and then I'll make it, rather than having it sit on a shelf. I'll prioritize other materials. Reason being is that this machine, maybe also even my machine, my own filament maker, when it's developed, is pretty slow. So the competitor, I can only do about a spool every 12 hours. Thus, I can only do about 2 spools a day, while the big manufacturers are doing a spool every 10 minutes about. Any 5 to 10 minutes, or they're doing 1 spool. So they have massive amounts of volume, but I'm setting up my business to be very low overhead, so I don't need to produce that much. So I can do a lot more experimental materials, and so we'll talk about that. So I'm most likely going to be prioritizing the more high-end materials that make more per spool and cost more per spool, so that I can make it commercially viable to make my own filament, rather than just for the commercial printing, because these guys are going to be used for the commercial printing, as these are not recycled materials, right? So these are going to be used for my commercial printing business. Eventually I plan on also switching that over to recycled material, but right now I'm just experimenting, so I want to make sure that I can get the machine dialed in just with virgin plastic, which these are both virgin plastics, before I use recycling plastics. So the first recycling plastic that I'm going to start making, which is more towards the high end, thus I can charge more per spool, is polycarbonate ABS. So I have a box slightly out of frame here that is 7 pounds of polycarbonate ABS, and that will make obviously about 3 spools, which is 6.6 pounds, and then I have 0.4 left over to make sure that I can make the full 1 kilogram spools, the full 3 1 kilogram spools. And then that will probably be in a white and black format until they come up with some, maybe like a Green Engineers green or something like that. Maybe some requested colors I'll add over time, but that just adds way more, because coloring adds a whole bunch more service time to start up the print, start up the filament making process, and I'll have to talk about that. And you have to do a lot of sorting and a lot of making sure that you get all of the colorant out when you want to go from black back to white. So most likely it'll be, I'll run a whole batch of one color and then a couple days, and then a whole batch of another color a couple days, rather than just flip-flopping back and forth. So obviously, because my my material output is going to be slower than usual, you may have to wait to pick one up. Most likely at the beginning, the demand is not going to be that high because nobody knows about it yet. So I'll be able to put together a back stock of a whole bunch of materials, and then at that point, some people are going to start to find out about it, and then start to slowly take the material off the market. But hopefully at that point I have a good enough lead because I can make 2 spools a day, right? So a polycarbonate ABS is most likely going to be my first material because I could also print it on my Stratasys 1200 SST ES or ES SST. So that'll be my first material, and I think I may do that material quite a bit. I found one supplier that I can get it from, which is regrind, so it's all regrind material. So it's not in pellet form, it's in shredded form, which is exactly how I would have it. So I'll probably do that. I'll clean out that supplier, as I mentioned in that update video. I'm most likely going to be getting material at the beginning from outside suppliers, and then eventually start to integrate stuff like PETG, shredding in-house, all that type of stuff, right? Shredding PETG, shredding polycarbonate ABS, shredding polycarbonate, shredding polycarbonate itself, shredding ABS itself, and recycling that. So right now we're going to stick with the polycarbonate ABS because it's kind of on the higher end of the spool cost per kilogram. So that should also jumpstart the business a little bit. But I do plan on experimenting with some other things. Now the next thing I want to talk about is kind of how the spool is going to work. So if you guys don't know, most likely these suppliers of the filament, right? They buy because they have such high quantities, they usually buy their spools in bulk. And so what that did is that they drove up a lot of the MOQs, the minimum order quantities, on the spools internationally. So I checked recently in China, and in China these spools, you have to have an MOQ of usually about 1,000. So you have to order 1,000 of these guys for them to even consider doing business with you. And then at 1,000, I think it's still like $1 or $2 a spool. So with 1,000, if I'm making 2 a day, that's like almost 2 years of production before you're able to get rid of all those spools. And obviously these take up a lot of space, right? So I have to have 1,000 of those laying around, then you got to store it, and then you have to pay for all the shipping. So that's $2 a piece, not including the shipping, to take up this much volume, this little weight, inside a shipping container, right? I think these actually clip together, so maybe when they ship it to you, they clip together. But this is an octave spool, so the spools that you would get are not exactly like that. So what I'm considering doing is doing something that they call like a master spool type of technology. So basically what it is it is a spool that comes apart. And so what happens is you 3D print the spool, and the spool comes undone, right? It twists off and locks, and then locks in place. This particular one, the original one, the OG one, was called a master spool. This particular one is a remix of it called the Slant 3D. So you can see slant3d.com. And this is actually from my own made material. Now this one, I just added some of the leftovers between the different color batches. So you notice it's multicolored. You could actually see kind of the gradient. So this is from one of my multicolored spools where it's kind of cool looking. It's got this gradient. And most likely these will be made from the remnants of because every time you switch between two different colors, you have to pour the material out to get the colorant out of it. So most likely that will go into a bag, and then that will be the filament from that will be made to be used to make these spools, right? Once I get to 1 kilogram of that. So I have a couple of those to get started to do these, right? Of a different, at this point it wasn't from the remnants, it was just from different mistakes that I made. And so these guys snap in, and then the filament goes into some of these holes in here. There's 2 holes, and I'll talk about how to use this at some point when I finalize all this stuff. So the reason why I want to use this is that I could print them on demand. They're printed, right? They're pretty light, they're pretty cheap to print. I could print one every 4 hours, right? And I have a couple plans with these, so there's going to be different configurations of these. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So how this works is that you can buy the filament just like this, where it comes on a spool, except for it would be on something like this, and I'll talk about some of the downsides of this one. So it comes on something like this, which is the Slant 3D spool, right? Where it's already done. It looks just like this. It's put together. It's just like how I had it before, which this guy, I have the seam going in the wrong spot, so it's kind of hard to turn, which I would fix in the future. This one was just a test. So right there, it comes like that. It's loaded with filament, right? And you're ready to go. You're ready to use it. Boom, done. You can dry it if you want to dry it. Throw it in the oven, and we'll talk about that in a second. So you could dry it, put it on your put it on your 3D printer. All the drawings of this guy will be available, so you know that it will fit on the arbor of your spool holder, and it will fit in a cartridge if you have a cartridge, if it's the right size, etc., etc. So you buy it, you use it just like a regular spool. But when you're done with it, you can take it apart, and I'll actually sell refills. Let me see if I can open it. There we go. I'll actually sell refills where it's basically this, but it's just held together with, it's either going to be twist ties, so just regular twist ties, or zip ties, one of the two. And then, so you have like 3 zip ties, and it's just a wrap, a winding of this. They call it a refill. It's a winding of this, but with no spool. So you have this guy, you take that guy apart like I just did, and then you put the winding on here, and you put your the end of your filament in here, and then you close the spool back up. And then when you close the spool back up, there you go. You've loaded a brand new you loaded brand new filament onto your spool. Now, so why is that good? Number one, it lowers the waste, right? And that's what the Green Engineer is all about. It lowers the waste, right? It's reusable. Reduce, reuse, recycle. So you're reducing the amount of waste, you're reusing it over again, and also most likely it'll be made out of recycled material. So reduce, reuse, recycle, right? That's all 3. That's the trifecta right there, which is perfect. So you get it the first time, you can buy the material, it'll come on a spool, and you're ready to go. And then when you use up that spool, that whole kilogram, you just order a refill, and then you can load the refill on there. We say, well, Stephen, why would I want to do that? Number one, I don't have to pay for a large MOQ and large shipping rate, and because I'm making my own material in-house, these are pretty cheap to make. So this is going to be cheaper than if I bought this and imported it in from somewhere else, right? That's number one. So it brings down the cost total altogether for the customer as well as for me, right? Number 2 is that once you've bought this once, you don't have to keep buying the spool every time that you order filament from me. So when you're done with this previous refill, you buy another refill. That way you save money because you're not buying the spool over again because you've already bought the spool, right? And also you don't have as much waste with these spools laying around your house, which I did have it before, but then I just reloaded all of them. So now they're all filled with filament now, which if you don't have a filament maker, then you can't do that. So this is the best option. And hopefully more and more companies will adopt this. There are also some other companies, that's not just mine, that you can buy material from and load it onto these spools, right? This is pretty standard. So that's the reason why I'm thinking of this. So this will be available in 3 different forms. One form is where it's this spool, similar to the spool, and I'll talk about that in a second. And it's already loaded with filament, right? 1 kilogram. That's one configuration. Second configuration is you're ordering it in refills. So you just order the filament itself, and then you undo the spool, right? You undo the spool, you put the filament winding on here, the refill, and then you close the spool back up, right? and you close the spool back up. There you go, you're done. Go through it. And then the third option is going to be you just can buy this by itself, right? You can buy this by itself, and then use it for whatever you plan on using it, whether you broke it or whatever. And then also this, I may make this available. Most likely I'll make it available so that if you want one yourself, you could print it yourself. Right? Now the chances of you being able to print it cheaper than I could make it might not happen, but with shipping you may be able to do it. I don't know. So that is kind of the plan, and so some of the research that is left is to get this guy how I want it. Because one of the big issues that I don't like is that if you notice right here, there's a gap. And so actually how Slant 3D designed this is they took the master spool idea, which was the original idea, because the master spool had two different sides. This one is the same exact part printed twice. So it's symmetrical here. And also they went about minimizing the amount of material needed to make the spool, which is great, except for there's a couple issues. Like I said, one of the first ones is that I plan on selling this material, this spool with the filament wound onto the spool, just like this spool is here. But because there's a big gap right here, the filament, when it's wound in here, when it's being wrapped, is going to fall in here. So most likely I'll modify this to where these two parts touch, just like this is touching. See here it's touching, that's fine. Right? So that will be probably modified. Another thing that I noticed is that there's no room for the straps. So if I so basically what I'll probably have to do is I'll have to make another spool to to make the refills on, and then be able to put it onto this spool, right? So, because then you need a way to get the chicken strap, they call them chicken straps, but the zip ties in here in order to go around the refill and attach it. And with that in mind, I may even just sell this with the filament and I'll load it on myself and then use just a regular refill to do it all the time to make sure that I don't run out of these, because then I'll have to swap between having this guy on the Filament Maker and loading it up versus, oh, everybody really just wants refills. They already have the spool, so they just want refills, so they buy the refills. So we'll see how all that works. I'm going to be very, very flexible on that, but I think this is kind of the option that I'm going to go with. Whether it's this spool specifically, or I'm going to switch to the master spool, which again just takes a little bit more material. But this one is more of a twist and lock. The other one threads in. We've got a 3D printed thread, so it threads together. So this is the master spool type technology. The reusable spool technology is the technology that I'm going to go with mine. Like I said, also you should be able to find a couple other manufacturers that use these spools, and to be able to buy refills from there. So what is the timeline looking like? So I'm thinking probably within a month or so I'll start to have some inventory available where you can go and purchase some of these stuff from me. So where would you be able to go? So the cheapest place that you can go is probably my website. I'll have it on my website store, thegreenengineers.com, and it'll be on my e-store, and then that'll be able to take off some of the prices of the differences to the platforms, right? Some of the platforms, they have fees, right? So I'll be able to remove the fees out of it, and then so you would get it for cheaper because I have to pass the fees on to the customer, basically. So also, other than that, probably at eBay first, and then try to get it on Amazon, and we'll see how that goes. So those will be the platforms that it will be sold on, and the first material, like I said, is most likely going to be polycarbonate ABS. I have not tried to make it yet, so we'll see how that goes. I plan on making it within the next 7 days, next weekend. I plan on making my first spool out of the polycarbonate ABS material. And then before then, I'm pretty much out of spools. I think I only have like 2 or 3 left, and I have another 5 kilograms of high impact polystyrene that I have to run through HIPS. So I'll probably be loading these, and I'll probably be doing the modifications of this spool or the master spool and see and basically print out a whole bunch of these different technologies. I think there's like 2 or 3 more than this one, so that would be like 4 total, and then see what's the best of each of them, and then kind of create a blend of the best one that I think would work, and see if I can have it to where you can get it also from other suppliers as well. So either it would be like this one compatible, which is a slant style spool compatible, or the master spool compatible, or both the slant and the master spool compatible refills. So that will give you the biggest amount of people that you can pull the spool from, refills from. Not just me. If there's a material that I don't manufacture or a color that I don't manufacture, you can go to. First, I would ask myself. First, I would send an email to me and see if I could make that for you in that color or that material. But if not, you can go to some of these other manufacturers and get refills from them. So that's kind of, I wanted to iterate more on this because this is coming pretty soon, so I wanted to make sure that you guys know about these different plans that I have going on. Now I may do a limited run of PLA here soon, because I do at my university have like 20 or 40 pounds of material, PLA and ABS, sitting there. Obviously ABS is not recycled, so it probably won't be on my channel. I'll use it just for the commercial printing until it's gone, and then maybe I'll shred up some of the failed prints and then remake those. But once all that stuff is gone, I'm probably going to switch everything over to recycled for both my commercial printing as well as the filament that I'm making. Either plant-based or that, right? So that PLA is pretty much free because I paid for it a really, really long time ago. So that may be a very small initial quantity of PLA that I put out. But I'm not sure on the timeline for that, so right now I'm just going to focus on the ABS polycarbonate mix. Alright, so I'll have another update when I have the polycarbonate ABS and I have some examples, probably a spool example for you guys, and I could show you guys the quality of the filament and some of the caveats of using a smaller, like a desktop style filament maker for manufacturing, because there will be some downgrade as far as the quality of the filament compared to one of these larger manufacturers. So that will be apparent as far as the diameter and the color consistency and some of those things. So I'll have to create some repeatability tests and get some logs of some different averages and stuff like that we'll be able to go off of to be able to compile a very thorough data sheet. And as we switch from the competitor's filament maker to my own, I'll be able to probably dial those in to be even tighter, to be even better, or on par with these large filament manufacturers. Alright, so that's where we're at now, just kind of reiterating this and wanted to expand on this from my plans from the update, because this is probably the most the closest thing that's going to happen, because I already have the equipment and I already have the material, and there's just a couple things that I need to iron out first before we get started. So that's where we're at right now. Really excited to get this going, and I guess technically it's my first continual product on the Green Engineers. I've sold some shredders and I've sold some filament makers in the past, the version 1 of the filament maker in the past, but really excited to get this guy going to start to get some feedback from customers, as well as get more experience with the filament making process as far as continual 3D printing, and to be able to set a continual filament making, as well as to get ready to stress test my new filament maker by basically having it run 24/7 as if it was a full production system, rather than like, you know, a kilogram here, a kilogram there. Because most of these machines, that's what they're used for. A kilogram here, a kilogram there, not 24/7 operation, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? Okay, so that's where we're at. Let me know any questions in the comments, and I will try to reply to them to the best of my ability. Any suggestions, go ahead and also put those inside the comments. That was one of the reasons why I made this video. If you guys have any suggestions or anything like that, let me know. It's still in its infancy, so this is the best time to change anything if I feel that it needs to be changed. And yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts. Alright, that's pretty much it for this video. I'll have another update video when we start to progress further on this project and we get closer to selling some filament. Alright, till the next video guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're not, and I'll see you guys in the next video.